See, we forget things. I'm going to pin. So am I big now for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in answer to the question, why do socks need to be divisible by 4 or 8? When you do the shaping for something like the toe, you have to make a decrease here and here and here and here in the same round. That's 4. So you have to have a pattern that's divisible by 4. It just makes it easier for all of the shaping that happens in a sock because it happens in the round, and there are a few sock patterns that are not divisible by 4. And most of them, many of them, not this one. This one is divisible by 4, not just by 8, but a lot of sock patterns that I've seen go in modules of 8.
So at what point will we be going through our worksheet with you individually so we can make sure that we're on track?
Right now.
Okay.
So if you get to that number, what is your number for number 5?
57.6.
So 50, so 60 is
So
divisible by 4 and 56 is divisible by 4.
Oh, I see. Okay, I was doing the whole, okay, that's what I didn't get. Okay.
So you could, so I generally recommend going smaller because the amount of negative ease, we're looking for negative ease of 10%. That's why we multiplied our foot measurement, our ankle measurement on the worksheet by 0.9.
Okay.
Right, that is in.
Right, number 4.
That was in number 4. I'm going to turn on my camera and let you see that on, let everybody see that.
So that means that I would cast on either 54 or 60 stitches. Is that right? No.
So 56 or 60. So
Okay.
the part that Suzanne is talking about is the counting, measuring, calculating. This is a worksheet that you can download and print directly from the website on the page for Sock Club under the first, I think it's under the very first date. There's a little underlined word here. It says you can download the worksheet here. That's where you can get it. And in this worksheet, it tells you how to make a gauge swatch. And it starts with Sock Club in January. It starts with a little explanation about negative ease, a little bit about socks and sock patterns, and then how to measure your feet. Did you have any issues or problems measuring your feet? Nope. Is everybody good with all of that? And then everybody made a swatch. And then
ask you 2 quick questions.
Certainly.
So, and I may know the answer to this, but I'm not sure. So I'm a loose knitter.
Mm-hmm.
Hands were a little sore when I did my swatch. You know, typically I wear, like, if I make something for myself, it's going to be a size medium. For the pattern, when I look at it, I came up with the stitches of 60, which would be a small.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming I did everything correctly, that it's just because
your gauge
was bigger.
Okay. What was your gauge?
The row gauge.
Yes, so that would be the stitch gauge number 2.
Stitch was 8.
Yeah, so this sock was written for 9. So if you're happy with your gauge of 8, then you should do the 60, which is a small, and that will make it big enough.
Okay. And then my second question, and it may be something you're going to answer when you talk about the pattern. So if you are, that's okay.
Okay.
When I looked at the pattern and it just came up with like small, medium, and large, I wasn't sure why we did this step then. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. So I discussed it. I know I discussed it in the first class. I know I discussed it in person at length, but sock patterns will say small, medium, large, and they do not give you a comparison.
Right.
So how
Okay, this is more to do it as a comparison to see which size we would make.
right. And
Okay.
it may be that it turns out that for you, absolutely, you're a medium and you're a medium and you're a medium and everything will come out. But like, aren't you a little surprised that you're not a medium?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So that's why we're going through this exercise of
I just
actually
wanted to
checking
make
our
sure
gauge.
something.
We have,
Beth, I started, I couldn't get more than 8 inches, 8 stitches to the inch. And I'm usually a medium, but I'm starting with 60 stitches.
okay. And I did this one for me. I think I admitted this and I didn't check my gauge and now it's going to my husband because this is way wider than my foot. So it's loose on me. So I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I had that trouble too, Beth. I did a gauge swatch. I'm using this bamboo sock, which I've never used before. And I did the gauge and I started the sock and it told me I should make the, like, what is it, 72 cast on. And I was using the 1.5 needles and I got through the cuff and started onto the leg. And I just thought it was so big. I actually went back to the size 64 with a 1.
Did you try it on?
I did. I've got one sock already done and it's perfect.
Okay.
But
and that's with the smaller needle and the smaller size.
yeah, but the gauge swatch told me I should do, so I don't know if this yarn like changes after you know what I mean? Because it's more elastic, I think, than.
I would say that the yarn changes less than the knitter.
Oh, well, then maybe I was having a bad day.
Yeah. So this is the tricky part about gauge is like, I can tell you to check your gauge until I'm blue in the face, and you can check your gauge until you're blue in the face, but there's a difference between how your gauge comes out on a good day and a bad day.
Yeah.
Or on slippery needles versus sticky needles, or with the bamboo yarn versus, like, I once had an issue with chenille yarn. I could not get chenille yarn to gauge unless I went down to like a size 1 needle. So different yarns, even though it's a sock yarn, even though it's the same weight as the other sock yarns, it could knit up differently. I know you did your gauge swatch in it, but I'm just using that as an example of so many different ways that gauge can be affected. So we could do all of this math, and at the end, we could potentially have a sock that doesn't fit. So I'm going to say this over and over again. You have to be willing to start over, and you have to remember to check early enough in the project that starting over won't gut you. Okay, so the ribbing and the first inch of stockinette of the leg, if you can't get your foot in that, or you put your foot in it and it's like an elephant sock on you, then you need to start over.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna make a rule that at 2 inches, we check our socks. Because if it doesn't fit at 2 inches, it's not going to. Ever. And 2 inches is a lot less painful to go back on than, so the best gauge swatch is always the knitted item, the full finished knitted item. That's the best gauge swatch you can ever have. And you don't have to do the whole thing. You don't have to finish the whole thing to figure out if it's too big or too small. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any other questions? Did that answer your question, Suzanne? You have one more.
Yeah, no, it did, but I just, as I'm learning now a little bit more about this, my stitch gauge was also 8. So, but that's okay. But so the other thing though is if I consider the ease and go down to 56,
That has to do with the size of your foot too.
right. But but still casting on the smallest says cast on 60. Should I just go ahead and cast on 56?
Yes, we will adjust your numbers as we go.
Okay,
Yeah, I cast it on 56 because that's usually a better number for me. Either the 56 or 58. 60 is always a little too big.
okay.
Okay.
Cool.
And also, and not that I want you to buy the pattern again, I do believe the DK weight patterns has a 56 in it. So
Okay.
I don't know if there's anybody on the Zoom that has the DK.
No.
Bernie does. Okay, so Bernie's on mute, but Bernie does, and so if you want to follow it for the but I will check that out and make sure that we have the right numbers for you as we go. The other thing that came up in the class this morning is that I'm just opening my folder with all my sock things and hat things in it. So here's vanilla is the new black. And I took a bunch of notes after class today that I just want to make sure that I share with you. And so that included, I printed out somebody's pattern, so I'll just cover that up. So I asked the two first people in the class if they had had any trouble counting their rows, and they said no, because I cut it open and I counted the threads.
Oh,
So for all of you for whom that is just like mind blown, my mind was blown this morning.
yeah.
I figured I counted the threads too, so.
Yeah, so they just counted the threads at the side, and it was really easy to check like how many were in the ribbing versus the top, and then we had the whole thing. So the reason I had you count an inch of ribbing is because that's about as much ribbing as I ever want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how many rows of ribbing you can do. You can choose how much ribbing you want to do. I hate ribbing. I wanted to check through the worksheets that everybody had done it. If you are between sizes on your worksheet, pick the smaller size. That's my recommendation. It's not gospel, but I think it's important to be snug with socks rather than loose, and they tend to loosen up. And the other thing, we had a big conversation about 1 at a time versus 2 at a time. So I just wanted to ask people on the call today how they feel about 1 at a time versus 2 at a time. Does anybody have, because we have some experienced sock knitters. I think Ingrid is a big 2 at a time proponent. Nikki, I don't know if you want to weigh in, or Bernie.
I do single, 1 at a time.
You do single 1 at a time.
Yep.
I do.
I always did two.
Two different circulars.
So you do 2 simultaneously.
Right,
Like
exactly.
your 4 pairs of hands.
No, I think one pair. I get one pair.
I want to be an octopus.
No.
I
Okay,
always
so-
did 2 at a time until I started sock club, and then it was like, oh, if I just do 1, I can make sure it fits before I do the second one. So then I started doing 1 at a time.
Oh,
I think that's how I am. I used to do 2 at a time, but then I realized I'm bad at counting.
oh, I hadn't heard that as a possible thought.
Yeah, but I have to
Warms
undo
my
less.
heart.
You
See,
have
I think
to
counting's
progress.
easier with 2 at a time because you don't have to keep track of how many rows you're doing because you're doing them at the same time though.
That's true. But if you make a mistake, you have to back up
Yeah.
2 at a time,
That's true.
or separate them and then get them back
I-
together and then
yeah.
get them back on the same row.
I do 2 with 2 sets of double points, and I do the ribbing and the ribbing, the leg and the leg, the heel and the heel, and that way.
Which
That's what I do, Elfie.
I think that sounds really smart. That's the way Liz does it. Okay, so I think that simultaneous knitting is a great thing, except that I am dirt cheap and I won't buy a second pair of needles.
Oh, you're kidding.
You're kidding. You have a store.
Yes, Yes, and I want you to buy the needles.
Well, I must have like 40 size 1 needles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like her.
So
Yeah.
I'm just saying that for, just to know, I'm so cheap that I won't get a second pair. I do have some second pairs of needles, but then I've now taught my eldest child to knit, and now some of my sock needles have disappeared strangely, and I don't know where they are. And I have a feeling they're in her sock. Their sock, sorry. And okay, speaking of,
When you have only one ball of yarn.
and you have only, and I'm too lazy. I'm lazy and tight. So I am too lazy to because I wound mine off into a ball.
Yeah, and then the problem also is if it's a striped one, you have to keep the same stripe sequence.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
Well,
Loosen
it
up,
depends on
Elfrida.
the pattern. Sometimes it's really very noticeable.
Yes, that's the point.
I like that.
No.
So here we go. Everybody's got a different opinion in sock club. That's okay.
Yeah.
We're allowed to all.
I'm knitting off a sock blank this time.
Oh yeah,
So
that's easy.
kind of helps them doing 2 at a time.
Yes, right.
That's what I should
Oh,
have
you're
done.
doing it from the Sweet Georgia sock blank?
Now I was gonna save that for a different pattern because I've had this probably 8 years, so it's time to use it. I have had the Sweet Georgia just for a few months.
Okay.
It hasn't. You haven't lived with it as long.
Right.
Okay. Alrighty. Any other thoughts? So 2 at a time. I just feel like this is a revelation. Because to make socks 2 at a time, Ingrid, are you on here with your 2 at a time? Are you doing them 2 at a time?
She was just there.
Ingrid.
Right here.
Okay, I was
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Hold still, you're not in focus. Okay, so what you need to, so if you haven't done this and you haven't looked at this, what Ingrid's doing is she has a really long circular needle, double pointed needle. No, you have two, I'm so sorry.
Circular.
Ingrid is doing them on two circulars. You can also do them on, you can also do it magic loop. But what happens, it's like they're on railroad tracks next to each other. And so you do, if you laid 2 socks down, so the left sock was on the left and the right sock was on the right. Hold them up again. Hold still there. So the one that's on the left, or the one that's on the right in her right hand, if you're starting on the right hand side, no, do the other finger because we're backwards. So if you're starting on the right hand side of that sock, you go across the front of that sock and drop your yarn. And you can see where the working yarn is dropped in the middle. And then you pick up the working yarn from the other sock and you go across the front of that sock. And then you turn the whole project over and you do the back side of the sock you just finished working on with the same yarn in your hand. And then you drop that yarn and then you pick up and you go across the other side of the other sock. So it's not complicated. It's not difficult. If you are a first-time sock knitter, please don't do this right now. Please, let's just focus on making a sock before you make 2 at a time, because I think it is.
It's the casting on that took me
Yes,
way to cast on.
I helped somebody cast on today, and it was a little depending on the little amount of caffeine that I had by 10. So, so I think you have to cast on half of one and then all of the second one. And then you have to knit the first round. It's not how you do it.
I cast all of them on one needle, transfer half onto my second needle, shove it down. I have to look at it, and then you have to make sure when you cast on the second sock, you're using the correct needle, or you have them like facing each other, and you can't knit them. So it takes a little.
Don't do this for a first-time sock.
It's not a first time. It's not.
No, you're not. You're not.
When I
cast
first
them
started
on,
knitting socks, they were on double points.
yeah, I cast them on double points and then slide them to the circulars.
Oh,
So
that's
however
nice.
you do it, I learned from a book, Cat Bordy.
catboardy. Is that
'Cause-
socks sail on double pointed needles? On circulars?
Yes, Soren Cirques or something like that. But
Hmm.
that was, we didn't have many video, YouTube was just kind of starting, and Cat Bordy was that book. She was the ultimate sock knitter.
This book is
person.
available. I got it off of Amazon. It's used. It was originally $17. I think I paid like $8 or $9 for it. It's not terribly expensive. It's a nice book to have. And that's Socks Soar on double pointed on circular needles. So if you want to try the 2 circulars, or like Miriam in the morning group today, 4 circulars, because she does 2 at a time, and then has them separately 2 at a time. So my problem with them is also, and I don't know if anybody was on the Instagram, I have a kitten and he chews through my yarn. So, and then I have cats. So nope. Can't do 2 at a time. There will be confusion and madness. So I'm not dissing it. I think I've done them 2 at a time and I really enjoyed doing it 2 at a time because like everybody says, they're done. When you're done, you're done. The one that I really want to try is the 2 at a time where one's inside of the other one.
Ooh. Oh, gee.
I
that
did
sounds
that my
tricky.
second pair of socks ever. I don't suggest it.
One mistake.
One mistake, and you don't know it until the end of the sock when you can't pull that one at the, yeah.
All right.
Now, some of you are some of you absolute beginners with putting socks onto your needles, putting stitches onto your needles? Do we have anybody who's never done it before? I see a hand. So what I wanted to do today, for pretty much the rest of the recording, we are going to do an elastic cast on called the Old Norwegian or the German twisted. I'm going to demonstrate that briefly. I think I demonstrated it last time. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to just show that, and then I'm going to show the regular long-tailed cast on, because if you can't do the German twisted, if you've tried to do it, if you've tried to follow the video and it's still like, no, I want you to do the long tail. And I just want you to be more consciously elastic and relaxed as you cast on, if you can be. Somebody asked me today, is it okay to cast on to 2 needles to make your stitches bigger? And my first reaction was, no, it is not okay. You cannot do that. And then I thought about it and I was like, if you can't relax when you're casting on enough to make your stitches elastic enough, then yes, of course you can cast on to 2 needles or bigger needle or whatever. Anything that's going to get your foot into that cast on is fine. It's all fine. So if your cast on still isn't loose enough, use a bigger needle, use both needles, do what you got to do. Okay. Thank you. Here we go back to the blue. This is my notebook for Sock Club. I thought it made a nice enough background. So I'm going to demonstrate on my long circulars to do the cast on, and then here they are. And then I'm going to transfer them to the double points so that we have that that skill set covered for the group. And then I'm going to join them in the round on the double points, which is essentially the same as when you join them in the round on Magic Loop. It's this, there's the same step involved. Okay. So with the long tail or the Norwegian, the Old Norwegian, German twisted, with those cast-ons, you're going to want to pin the video so it's big enough for everybody. All right, good. Big enough. I'm going to put the ball down there, and I'm going to want a tail longer than a few inches. So the length of tail is depending on the number of stitches you have, but I tend to do like a tailor's measure against my arm. So I do this measurement, and that is what I think of 30 stitches. So if I'm doing 64, I do a couple of those and then a little bit. And that may be wasting a little bit of yarn. And I'm okay with that because I'd rather waste a little bit of yarn than redo. I don't want to redo. When I hold my working yarn, so I've got, I never really look to see which one's over my thumb and which one's over my pointer because I hope that I have enough yarn there. And when I do bend it in half, I open it up with my thumb and my pointer finger. So if this is your loop, you're going to open it up with the thumb and pointer finger, and you're going to grab the two ends below with the rest of your fingers. So it makes a triangle. Okay. So I showed you that I like to do this twist where I come in with my needle and I just twist for the first stitch. And then the German twisted was around and down, over and back through. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. The way that I teach my students how to do the long tail cast on, which is a simpler cast on, but also has more elasticity, is I go up the thumb, down, I run my needle down the pointer to pick up this yarn, and then I pivot and I come down the thumb. So it's held in the same position as like in a triangle, and then you can pull the yarn down to make a V. And the V makes a loop on your thumb. You come up the thumb to pick out the outside of that loop, pivot around to get the yarn that's on your pointer finger, and then run the needle tip down your thumb again. Sorry, I moved it out of sight. Let me just go back. So up the thumb, you could run it down the pointer finger to pick up that strand, and then down the thumb. Now there's a new stitch, and it's coming through the loop that's on your left thumb. So I drop my thumb out of the loop and use my thumb to tighten up that stitch to the needle so that I don't have to really reposition my hand so much. So I go up, down, down. And then my technique is to lift the needle up as I simultaneously bring my thumb down. And I'm not tightening that stitch on the needle. I am very aware that I want to get my other needle in there later and that I want it to fit my foot. So I'm not making a tight stitch. So think of hugging your extremely frail osteoporotic aunt and not breaking any bones. You want the yarn to be gently surrounding the needle, but not tight in any way. Okay, that the image in your head should be there's no tension on this stitch. It's just enough on the needle to stay there. And you're going to do that 64 times or 56 times or 60 times. So the more you drop your other fingers, the more you let go of them and have to regrip, the more you're going to slow yourself down. If you can keep a hold and just let the yarn run through your fingers, you'll actually find that you can cast on very quickly for this project. I'm not going to do the whole 64. I'm just going to do enough that I can join it in the round for the double points. Any questions about this technique? Has anybody tried this technique and not been able to do it?
I sort of just have like two comments that I found helpful. One is that sometimes when I would do this with a long tail cast on, I wouldn't like, it wouldn't cause any problems, but I wouldn't like how it would feel or work when the yarn that is forming kind of the wrapping at the bottom would end up being my working yarn instead of the one that was around the needle.
Okay.
And I think if you have it be the one that your thumb has, if you make the tail be your thumb, you end up with the working yarn going around the needle from the start. So then when you start your first row, it's already.
Correct. You're correct, because I just checked, and the one I'm making loops with my thumb. So this is another way of doing the same cast on. And this is my working yarn on this side, the left. So if I swap it over, and you can swap it over at any time, if you feel that way. God bless the beer man. One of the ways you can do it is you can hold the stitches out. So if you have trouble with the slingshot, you can make a loop with your thumb and put the needle in it and wrap around with your other hand. And this is probably easier for people who are not continental knitters, but this is the way a lot of people are taught to do a long tail cast on. I find it a little tricksy because I just let go of my tension on both sides and I wasn't sure what was the stitch and what wasn't the stitch. But that's another way to do a long tail cast on. Another thing that it's nice to know about the long tail cast on is that you can make loops on both sides and wrap them and put them over. So you can actually make, it takes longer. It's a little awkward usually on the other side, but you could make a ribbed cast on. Whoop, that has to go over. And that's kind of cool. So this is not going to be the cast on of my socks because I'm doing too many demos. You can also do that when you're doing it slingshot method. So this would be the normal, and this would be the opposite. You go into that loop, pick up this one and down. So you just reverse which finger you're going up and down. So you can actually do ribbing in your beginning. And if you do ribbing in your beginning, you will be adding a little bit of elasticity. So if you're one of those people who needs as much elasticity as possible, but don't like the German twisted, ribbing your cast on because you're sort of corrugating those stitches will give you a little bit more elasticity. And then I cannot emphasize enough, whether you're doing the regular long tail cast on or you're doing the German twisted, that the tension of the stitch, the tension of the yarn around the needle can't be so tight that they don't move easily, that they don't slide onto the needle reasonably well. You don't want to have to really you don't want to have to work for every single time you move the stitches from the cable to the needle. Now, I am a big fan of the Chow Goose because of how smooth this join is, but it's still a join and you have to be able to get the stitches easily up there. Okay, now if this was my full 64 stitches, I would bring the cable through the middle. So I would bend the yarn, and between the two halves of stitches, I would bend them like that, stretching the yarn like that. And then I would turn it and arrange it so that my working yarn was on the back right hand. I always think of it as the back right hand corner. And I would push my front needle in. And this would be the same if you're doing magic loop or on two circulars. And then you want to move so in this, for magic loop, I'm bringing the back needle out to do it. If I were doing two circulars, I would be taking the needle from the other side of the front But then we're going to make the first stitch. And when we make the first stitch, we don't want this yarn, the working yarn, to cross. I hope that's the working yarn, to cross the cable. So we don't want it to wrap itself around the cable. Oh, that's unfortunate. It's a red yarn and a red cable. I apologize for that. So you want to make sure that when it goes around this needle, that there's no twist of the yarn, there's no wrap of the yarn around the cable. And then I pull it really tightly to make the first stitch. We talked about this morning whether or not we do anything extra. I think we talked about it on the video last time. I don't do anything extra. I use my tail later because I've left such a long tail. I use my tail later to tighten that up. So that's how you would join it if you were doing magic loop or 2 circulars. I just want to demonstrate. So if you cast on your stitches onto one double pointed needle, and you'd rather use the double pointed needles, I have here a set of double pointed needles. They're also red because I planned ahead. Silly me. I'm going to take out 3 to slide these onto and make them into a triangle. I can get them out of the packaging, which Julia Child would have had one in the oven already. Okay, so here's my working yarn and here are my stitches. I've turned it back around to the other side. And what I want to do is I want to slide the stitches onto, and it doesn't really matter in which order. I'm going to take a double pointed needle and I'm going to slide the stitches on knitwise. So I'm going to zoom in. Oh, hello. Here we go. I'm going to try and focus a little bit more on my terrible fingers. It's not my favorite. Can you all see those stitches?
Yeah.
I just want to demonstrate that you're sliding purlwise. So when you're moving stitches around, always move them as though to purl. So always come into the stitch from behind the leg, not into it as if to knit. And that is to preserve the twist, or the mount of the stitch on the needle. Because a stitch is like a horseshoe. The right leg of the stitch should be in front, typically in knitting. So there are some knitters who have their stitch in back, but they usually have learned without somebody overlooking them, or they've learned from somebody who does it that way as well. Once you've put a third of the stitches onto the first needle, you remove the next needle. And I think the most important thing about this is that you want to stay in one place. You don't want to be in a position of being disturbed while you're setting up your stitches, no matter what way you set them up, especially if you're going to do 2 at a time. But if you're setting up stitches for double pointed needles, it's really hard to keep everything from being a little squirrely and fiddly at the beginning, as you will see. And so I am not moving around a lot. So here's my second needle coming, or my third needle coming into the next stitch that I cast on here. I'm coming in purlwise. So I've got 3 tips. And my biggest recommendation is make this one go away as much as you can, like set those stitches in the middle. So the needle that you're no longer working with, make the stitches be in the middle of it. So the tip of it is not in your area of work. And you're going to have to work around it a little bit, but this is a Zen moment in knitting. Working with double pointed needles takes a moment of just relaxation and focus on the 2 needles you are working with and completely ignoring the needle that is not involved in the stitches. So I'm ignoring that big fat needle sticking in my eye, and I'm just working here on these 2 needles, and I just ignore that one that's sitting there and move my stitches like I want to, and it's flopping around, but I'm not letting it flip over. I'm not letting it dangle. I'm keeping it over a table or my lap, because I don't want it to twist. I don't want it to get all twisted around. I want to keep the line of stitches on the same side of all of my needles. Okay, see that? The line of stitches. Okay, now my 3rd needle is still a circular. So if I had been doing this on a double points to start with, I would be on my 3rd double point, or could be my 4th double point. I didn't really cast on enough to do it onto 4, so I'm going to stick with 3 today. And many sock knitters who work with double points prefer to have the instep stitches on one needle. Correct me if I'm wrong, Elfrida. And the heel stitches, the bottom of the foot stitches on 2 needles, and to have the needles be in a triangular formation instead of a square. And the reason is a triangle, when you're working, the stitches are never pointing to the ground. The needles are never pointing at the ground. Like if I'm working on these stitches along this needle, let's join them in the round and I'll show you what I mean. So to join them in the round, I need another needle. So I'm going to use a 4th needle, and I'm going to join in the same way. So again, I haven't let anything get twisted. I haven't let anything go crazy bonkers. And so they should not be twisted in any way. I'm going to take my 4th free needle and put it in place. Yep. There. Okay, and now I'm going to take my working yarn, and without wrapping it around this needle again to make an extra stitch, I'm going to wrap it around this needle as tightly as I can. And then I'm going to pull it through the stitch. Now see how that other one wants to be in there? It doesn't belong in there. We're just going to ignore it. I want to make that as firm as I can on the first one to close up the circle. And then I want to just demonstrate what I mean by they're not perpendicular to the ground. So once I start working across these stitches, and initially you're going to be ribbing, so of course that's fun because you get to move the yarn even more, but you're ribbing and you don't have any needles that are really pointing straight down. Sorry, I keep running off the side. So I'm ribbing. And because of the angle of my triangle, the needles aren't really pointing straight at the ground. And that's a little bit different from if you set them up in a square. And so many sock knitters like it better to have the socks in a triangular setup for knitting, and they don't lose their needles. And I will say that I had not known that when I knitted my socks on double points. Sorry, I keep wandering off to the left. And so I had trouble keeping my needles from falling out. That was not, and the other thing is these are longer needles, and longer needles, if you move the stitches into the middle, make it much harder for your stitches to fall off.
Mhm.
Now, Liz uses wooden needles, I think, pretty much. You like the Likes?
I love the Likes.
Okay.
They don't move, the yarn doesn't move as much.
It's a pretty sticky surface, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but notice, like, even though these two are flipping around wherever I go, I am only working here. And only working here is the same as everybody else. You know, we just work with 2 needles at a time. So even though these other 2 needles are present, even though I'm going to turn them and they're still going to be there, When I turn the work, I have no idea if that was just a knit or a purl. Can't remember. I was talking. I'm just going to go in ahead and knit this one. So you're going to, again, make sure, well, I'll purl it. If I come in to purl it, I want the yarn in front, just like I would normally have the yarn in front of my stitches. And again, that's so that the yarn doesn't cross around the needle that I was just working on. The needle that we just finished. I want the yarn not to create extra stitches.
Or make a big, or make a ladder, make a big ladder.
Or make a big ladder. So how do you avoid ladders?
I like 3 needles. I think, many people think if you have 4, it lessens the ladders. I don't think so.
Well, it lessens them by 1.
And what I do is, sometimes I will move I will adjust the beginning stitch every once in a blue moon.
Okay.
So that, so I'm not starting in the beginning of that needle on the same stitch.
Do you see ladders sometimes in your work and do they block out?
They block out. I don't see them that often.
So I used to notice ladders really egregiously in my socks and my other things done in the round on double points.
Once you wash them, you don't see them. Once you wash them, you don't see them.
Okay. And then the other thing I would say about that is I see them a little bit in my magic loop. You can see I'm going to back this out.
You haven't washed them yet.
I haven't washed them yet. I'm going to back out the zoom. And I don't know if it's easy to see on this because it's such a bright, but there's a ladder here. And that's my halfway point. And
who's going to be looking at your feet like that?
Who's coming to get my feet? Yeah, so that's not it. That's just the color change and the self-striping, but I have this ladder and it's right at the middle point of this, the sock, and it'll come out when I wash it. Okay.
Well, when you knit it, every time you went around, just every few rows, just move a stitch every once in a while.
Spiral around a little.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is how I join in the round on double points. So I like to do all of the stitches at once and then separate them onto the needles. I don't, because I want to hold the needles still, get this out of my face. Because I want to hold the needles still, I don't do, the cast on onto separate needles because it's easier for me to keep the needles in the triangle and not have them spin around if I slip them one by one from one single needle. And I know Elfrida and Liz both do double pointed needles. Is that how you cast on, or do you cast on onto separate needles? They're not going to tell us.
I like to cast on one needle.
On one needle. Okay. So I think that's reasonable. Any other tips?
The other way, and I think I tried to do it the other way, and sometimes I think I ended up with the stitches being twisted because I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, I think it's easier to get them twisted if you try and do all of the stitches onto each separate needle.
Yeah.
Did Elfrida go?
You could cast them, Liz. You could cast them all onto one magic loop needle, and then you would have to work.
Okay, we're not having fights on here. There's no room for sock club.
Sure, thank you very much for that.
For those of you who aren't aware, there's a long-standing discussion about whether or not Liz should use double points or magic loop. So
I learned though.
You have learned. You've done a great job.
I have learned.
So
so I know I have a comment. I know on occasion, I'll put my sock down and I will come back to it. And sometimes I start to knit in the opposite direction. So I put, yeah, so I get a nice bump there and then I realize what happened and I have to rip it out. But I put like a little clasping stitch marker on the side I want to be on the outside, so that when I come back to it, I know, oh, I need to go in this direction instead of like having a nasty bump in my sock. So
yes, when you're knitting in the round and when you're knitting on double pointed needle, or when you're doing things with two socks at a time, it can be really confusing. And the same old rule applies, which is the working yarn is attached to the last stitch you knitted. Where should that stitch be? That stitch is in your right hand. So the working yarn should be on the right hand side. The only time it's not on the right hand side is if you're working flat and it's at the beginning of a row. Otherwise, it's on your right side. Okay, now Sock Club is going to continue on this pattern next month. And so I plan to demonstrate the heel turn. So I'm not going to demonstrate the increases for the heel.
Oh,
Who said that?
Liz.
Liz, are you okay with the increases for the heel?
I don't understand the chart.
Oh,
Yeah.
hold please. Let me see if I can get the chart. You don't understand the chart? Let's cover the chart then. I apologize. I should have thought about that.
We're talking about the heel increases, right?
Heel increases.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go.
That's what's going to make that pretty diagram.
Yes, it is. All right, so here we are.
You know, visual. I tried to match it to what the wording said.
Okay. So I just want to show the chart because I don't want to get into copyright infringement issues with showing the pattern on the Instagram, on the YouTube, the Zoom, whatever we're doing, whatever.
Oh, I don't see that. Oh,
Okay. Now, is this the chart you mean?
I bought the bigger sock. I'm talking about the chart with the numbers that shows you the heel increase table. I'm talking about
If
the
you
table.
edit over a little bit, it's the first chart. There you go.
Yep, that one.
Setup. So the increase number 1. This just tells you whether it's knitwise or purlwise. So I will use a knitting needle as a pointer and I'll show you which is which. Here is the first increase. So this little symbol, for something in focus.
Okay. So my pattern, the larger pattern doesn't have that schematic.
This schematic?
It doesn't have, it just has the one that on the left.
Oh, come see me.
Okay.
So this is, and I'm just going to use this because I don't want to show the pattern on Zoom.
That's okay. That's okay.
But this shows you that when you start, now to be completely fair, in a previous iteration of Sock Club, when we had this same issue come up, we did not follow a particular, like we did not keep it make one purlwise or make one knitwise. We just made them exactly the way we wanted to every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So that is possible. So it's make one or make one purlwise. So the first 2 are purlwise, the second 2 are knitwise, the next ones are purl, knit, purl, all the way up in pairs. So you start with 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, all the way up. And you see that in the heel increase table setup.
Okay.
Okay, and the reason is that when you do that, then in the next round, it's purled. So you're making the rib that's at the back of the sock. And you're keeping it in pattern. But you could make one knitwise for all of them. So the first ones are this valley. And you could make them knitwise and it would change the pattern slightly, but it would change the pattern for your sock exactly the same way. Right? Both of your socks would be the same and nobody's going to come and check your feet. And they're not going to, you know, I will promise not to call the knitting police on you and it should be fine. But the pattern is written so that it goes straight into, because I made one purlwise, it goes straight into this purl gutter between the knit stitches. And it creates that channel from the very beginning. So you can make one purlwise and it will look smooth, or you can make one knitwise and it will look smooth in the next round. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody else have questions about that chart?
I have this, I don't have that draft on mine either because I'm doing the DK weight.
Yeah, me too. I'm doing
I
the
sent
DK.
it to you. Look at your phone, Beth.
When
Look
you
at what-
buy that pattern, don't you get the smaller pattern too, though?
No,
So
we
does it?
we just
Oh, I
bought
thought you got
one.
both patterns if you bought the DK weight one.
You can't. There's a bundle too where you can get both.
There is a
Oh,
bundle.
okay.
You could,
Oh, that's what I saw. Okay.
Yeah.
and there's a vanilla bundle, I think, that has all three, the toe up or the toe up, the leg down, and the DK weight.
Yeah, I have a lot of sock patterns. I was just interested in learning this heel.
Learning this heel. I think this is such a cool heel.
It does. It looks, everyone says it's so comfortable online.
And then this is how, so the nice thing also about this sock pattern, and one of the reasons I chose it for our first project, is because in other sock patterns, you have to pick up gusset stitches.
Yes.
We don't have to pick up any gusset stitches because we've increased here.
Right.
And then we do our heel turn. And when we're done with our heel turn, we're back to the correct number of stitches.
Yeah.
So I just want to make one other comment about it, and then I think we're pretty much out of time for today. I chose to give you in the worksheet your ankle measurement as your first to determine your cast on, because we're doing top-down stitches, top-down socks, right? So here in 4, calculate your sock cuff size for the top-down sock by multiplying the ankle circumference versus against 0.9. So that was, remember we did that and we talked about that earlier. When we get, so if your ankle and foot are more than 10% different, and you can look on the other side at your ankle and foot measurements here, if they're significantly different, then you may want to do a different measurement. You may want to repeat this measurement for your foot size. Most people's feet are pretty close, which is why most sock patterns are written with only one size. But if you have a significant difference in your ankle and your foot here, then we'll talk more about not decreasing all the way down or decreasing further, so that this measurement is perfect for your foot. Okay. So that's we can customize this sock, and that's something that a store-bought sock won't let you do. Okay. So is there any other question about increasing for the heel? You're going to do it in pattern as you go. And so what happens is you place a marker here and the pattern tells you to do your increase before the marker. You place it here and you do the increase before the marker and then work 2 and do another increase. So you only have one marker for that heel, but you have to work in pattern up to it. So it won't say just knit all the way up to it. It will say work in pattern up to the marker and then make one knitwise or purlwise at the marker. And if you keep track of the number of increases that you've done, that will line up with that chart.
You're
So
only increasing every other row. You're not increasing every row.
you're increasing on the even row or the odd rows.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You're only increasing on the odd rows. There's a plain round worked in pattern in between.
Whatever that means, working pattern. Yeah. This is just a knit pattern. Okay.
Okay. I could go back and say hello to everybody here. Oh, start your video. I was trying to come back to being in person. Hello. Okay, I'm looking at everybody's smiling faces and it seems like you're all nodding. Some of you are nodding more enthusiastically than others. Some of you are like, I'm nodding, but I'm gritting my teeth. I know who you are. So if you have questions, now's a good time. But if you don't have questions, that's okay.
So if we want to see this recording, we do what?
So to see this recording, you'll go to, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go here.
The website.
Yes. So here's the web. So this is the page. I'm going to go back a page. So this is the Sock Club info page.
Right.
I'm just going to navigate to it from the home page. So here's our home page. So when you come to the home page, when you go to our website, this is what you get. You get all of that annoying stuff going on down below. And if you go straight to classes and clubs and Cals, click on that, then you get all of these choices. You want to go to Sock Club info. When you get to Sock Club info, it describes it a little bit. It says when, and then it gives our full schedule for the year. The measuring your feet and get engaged is now identified as a video recorded on January 3rd. So if you click on that, it goes straight to the YouTube. Here we go.
Oh, nice job.
Okay. Okay. It shut me up. and then you'll hear Remy barking in the background again. And then if you look here, it says click here. This word here is underlined. That's the page that has the measurements on it. If you have not found it yet and you're just starting with us, you can print this out from your computer. If you cannot print it out, contact us and we will send you a paper copy in the actual mail. We used the book Custom Socks, and I do recommend that book. We don't sell it at this time. So that is a live link in that same day. It's a live link if you would like to buy a copy of the book from Kate Atherley. We recommend it. It is a lot of math though. Liz doesn't like it.
I like the book though, but I don't like the math.
You like the book. Okay. And she has a lot of charts that are helpful. I had somebody in class this morning who said that she followed along with the charts and that it was really helpful because she saw that her foot size, her shoe size was actually, she had a different measurement than what the chart said her foot size should be, her actual foot size. And it's because her feet are long, not wide. And so she wears a different shoe because she needs to accommodate the length, which is just goes to show you everybody's feet aren't the same. And then just on here, I want you to see as well that next month we're finishing Vanilla is the New Black. I see that Eva has her hand raised.
Yes, this is the first time I've been on here, and I missed most of your program, hey?
Okay.
You're almost finished?
We're almost finished, but as soon as I'm done, I've been recording it this whole time.
Uh-huh.
And when I'm done, I'm going to process the recording. I'm going to type a little bit of information in about it and make sure that it's a clean recording. And then I'm going to put it on YouTube. And then here on January 20th. So this was, I was talking about January 3rd, that if you go to measuring your feet and get engaged, it's underlined. So here it's going to be casting on. And then after casting on, it's going to say video recorded January 24th. And so this will be underlined and you'll be able to click right there to watch the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So can you tell me what time your shows are on?
So if you're able to come in store, it's at 10 a.m. in the store. And if you're not able to come in store, we do the Zoom at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern, whatever we are time. So where are you?
I'm in Saskatchewan.
Wow.
Canada.
Wow. Welcome. I think you may be our first Canadian.
Is that right?
I think so.
I see you have the pattern there that I have too, and I have tried it, but I couldn't make it. So now I got really interested in your class.
Oh,
but
I'm excited.
The times I have written down for the sock club are 2:30 to 3 Eastern time.
That was last year.
Okay, and 6 to 7 Eastern time.
So last year I did not work on Mondays at the shop. And so I was able to run sock club twice on Zoom. And, earlier this year, I started working back in the store on Mondays because we changed our schedules around. And so it enabled us to have an in-person time for people who are able to come in, but we don't record that one because it's in person and it's just a lot of people, asking.
So what time should I have been on
6 o'clock
tonight?
6
at 6
p.m. Eastern time. So what time is it where you are right now?
It's 6:11.
Okay, it's 7:11 here. So at 5 o'clock your time.
5 o'clock our time. Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Eva. I'm so glad you're joining us.
Okay.
How's the weather? We think it's cold. And it's, what is it, 20 degrees Fahrenheit right now?
Minus 20 today. It's not too bad.
Not too bad. So
no.
So you need your knitted socks.
Well, they feel good, and it's because I have a habit of having cold feet.
Well, I am so delighted.
A sweater.
They say to put a hat on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've heard that too. Maybe that's what I should do.
So that's, I hope that helps with navigating the site a little bit. I'm always happy to demonstrate that anytime anybody needs anything.
So this one would have been 5 to 6 our time.
5 to 6 your time. And it will be normally 5 to 6. And I see Jennifer sent me a message.
Okay.
Okay. Jennifer, are you still on? Nope. Okay. You are still on. Is Jennifer still on? Okay. I'm going to say that we're going to end the recording. And then if Jennifer would like to stay on, I will explain whatever I can about the measurements and the questions. So I'll stay on, and you guys all have a great week. If you're interested in other projects, we've got those coming up. we have the crochet block of the month next week. So thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.